Shedeur Sanders wasn't just passed over, he was pushed down. This hook begins with the uncomfortable question: how does a player with elite stats, NFL pedigree, and national spotlight fall to pick 144? The answer, the video claims, lies not in Sanders' performance but in how the league manipulates perception.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
His close association with Deion Sanders may have made him a target in a league uncomfortable with certain personalities disrupting the status quo. What emerges is the story of a young quarterback whose career path was altered not by lack of skill, but by a calculated effort to delay his rise. Tom Brady and Kevin Stefanski are accused of being complicit in that manipulation, not for malicious reasons, but to buy time for deeper plans. In this light, Sanders becomes more than a player. He's a case study in the NFL's struggle to manage its image and future. With Brady's public denials ringing hollow and Stefanski's name tied to strategic silences, the real story isn't just draft drama. It's about a system trying to maintain control as new stars emerge. Whether Sanders was pushed down to build him back up elsewhere, or sidelined to cool the spotlight, the video insists the truth is far from what we were told. And Sanders' eventual success might be the clearest indictment of all. Folder not found, create new folder, LP podcast. Tom Brady said he had nothing to do with it. But the moment he opened his mouth on Logan Paul's podcast, people stopped believing him. This isn't just a theory, it's a growing, uncomfortable reality that fans, analysts, and even insiders can't ignore anymore. Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback with elite bloodlines, strong tape, and a sharp mental game, fell all the way to pick 144 in the NFL draft. And no one, not a single scout, exec, or media outlet, has offered a legitimate reason why. Instead, what we got was silence. And then, Tom Brady, normally calm, polished, media-trained within an inch of his life, getting visibly uncomfortable when the topic came up. He stuttered. He fumbled his answer. And when pressed, he gave off the exact energy of someone who knows they're closer to the story than they want to admit. This is the same Tom Brady who's built an entire post-retirement brand around control, calculated moves, and legacy management. He's now a part owner of the Raiders. He's sitting in meetings. He has access. And in the lead-up to the draft, he was more than just a spectator. Now connect that to what happened to Shedeur Sanders. There was no injury, no off-field drama, no dramatic red flags in scouting reports. And yet team after team passed on him, all while keeping suspiciously quiet. That silence said everything. It wasn't that he wasn't good enough. It was that someone didn't want him to go yet. Brady has denied involvement. But denial doesn't mean distance. It doesn't explain the vibe he gave off when the topic came up. It doesn't explain the nervous body language, the vague word salad, or the way he pivoted like someone trying to shut down a question without making it obvious. That was the moment the story shifted from internet theory to genuine suspicion. Because Brady doesn't get rattled. Not in front of cameras. Not on podcasts. Not in interviews. The fact that he flinched at all, that's what made this real. And then there's Kevin Stefanski. Not a front-facing name like Brady, but someone whose power flows quietly through the league. A coach with deep connections, a respected voice behind the scenes, and now a key name tied to rumors of covert deals during the draft process. The suggestion is that he and others were involved in nudging Shedeur's stock downward, an informal operation, not illegal on paper, but deeply questionable in context. The conspiracy, if you want to call it that, doesn't allege anything explosive like Brady ordering teams around. It's more subtle than that. It's about influence, private conversations, gentle pressure, a few off-the-record suggestions. That's how power works in the NFL. Quietly, without fingerprints. Brady didn't have to say, "Don't draft him." All he had to do was float the idea that Shedeur wasn't quite ready, that he might need time, that he'd be better served going later, developing longer. That subtle redirection spreads through scouting departments like wildfire. Now zoom out. The same Brady who publicly distances himself from the draft process is also part of a franchise. The franchise, that insiders believe could eventually be Shedeur's true landing spot. And that detail matters, because it supports the theory that this wasn't about keeping Shedeur out of the league. It was about controlling how and where he entered. If Shedeur becomes a raider under Brady's eye, if that slow development strategy becomes a long-term play to turn him into the face of Brady's new empire, it'll look like a masterstroke. And it'll also prove everything people are speculating now. The narrative becomes obvious. Manipulate the draft to your advantage. Let a talented, high-profile quarterback fall far enough that you can grab him cheap, develop him quietly, and when the time is right, drop the redemption arc. Brady the savior. Brady the visionary. Brady the executive genius who built a star. That's not far-fetched. That's how the league works when no one's watching. Except this time, they were watching. People noticed Shedeur's fall. People noticed the silence. And when Brady couldn't keep his story straight, they noticed that too. The NFL has always operated with two stories, the one you see and the one behind the scenes. Drafts aren't just about tape and interviews. They're about leverage, narrative, and power. And Shedeur Sanders, young, composed, and carrying the Sanders legacy, was a threat to all of it. He doesn't fit the model of a quiet rookie who waits his turn. He's been in front of cameras. He understands media. He doesn't need the league to build his brand. And if the NFL is a tightly controlled PR machine, players like Shedeur break the system. They can't be repackaged. So what happens when a player walks in with that much self-direction? They get stalled. That's what this video lays out. That Shedeur's slide wasn't about readiness. It was about discomfort. The league didn't know how to control him, so they slowed him down. Not permanently, just long enough for the people in power, like Brady, to reset the board and plan their move. And yet, through all of it, Shedeur stayed silent. No press conference. No angry tweet. No cryptic Instagram caption. He just got back to work. And that is the most dangerous response of all. Because that kind of discipline, that's what breaks the system in the long run. He's not spiraling. He's not reacting. He's just building. And as he builds, the cracks in the draft narrative only get deeper. Because if he performs, if he lives up to the potential he was supposed to have been drafted on, then every single person who passed on him, and everyone who helped orchestrate it, has to answer for it. Brady included. That's why this matters. Because this isn't just about Shedeur Sanders getting overlooked. It's about who had a hand in making it happen and why. It's about control. Who has it, who loses it, and who's trying to keep it behind the scenes while telling fans a completely different story. This story exposes more than just a questionable draft slide. It exposes how narrative, perception, and influence shape the careers of young athletes before they even step on the field. And how people like Tom Brady, now in positions of executive power, are no longer just reacting to the game, they're quietly manipulating it. So when Brady sat there, tripping over his words, giving the most uncomfortable answers of his media life, that wasn't just a bad interview. That was a spotlight on the truth. Fans deserve to know when storylines are being written before the games are even played. They deserve to know when someone like Shedeur Sanders is being repositioned, not based on performance, but based on someone else's timeline. Someone else's legacy play. Someone else's strategy. If you've made it this far, you see it too. Shedeur wasn't passed over. He was positioned. Deliberately. Strategically. Silently. But silence doesn't last. Let us know what you think. Did Brady let the truth slip, or is this just the beginning of something bigger? Is Shedeur the face of the NFL's new wave, or the latest victim of old guard control? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you've caught on to the pattern, share this with someone still defending the "he wasn't ready" narrative, and subscribe for more breakdowns. Because if this is the game they're playing now, we're going to keep calling every move. The NFL thrives on control. Of the game, of the media, of its stars. And what makes the Shedeur Sanders draft story so explosive isn't just the fall to pick 144, it's what that fall represents. It's what was orchestrated, and more importantly, what was hidden. But now, that curtain is being ripped back. And standing in the middle of it all is Tom Brady, no longer just the face of the league's past, but, as this story suggests, a key architect of its future. Quiet, powerful, and, based on how it all unfolded, possibly manipulative in ways he publicly denies. At first glance, it's easy to dismiss. Brady? The GOAT? Meddling in the draft to control a rookie's narrative? It sounds extreme. But then you watch the Logan Paul podcast clip. You hear that moment. The one where Brady's tone cracks, his words falter, and suddenly the unshakable face of NFL calm looks exposed. Because when Shedeur's name came up, something shifted. It wasn't just nerves. It was discomfort. Brady didn't just dodge the question. He tried to answer and then realized, mid-sentence, that he couldn't. Not without stepping into something. Not without triggering more questions. So he backtracked, gave a vague non-answer, laughed a little too tightly. The kind of response that doesn't come from innocence. It comes from being too close to something. And that's what made fans stop and look twice. Brady has been in the eye of football controversy before. Deflategate, Spygate fallout, AFC dominance critiques. He's faced harder questions and handled them with surgical precision. But this time, the body language gave him away. And then came the dots. Brady, now part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Shedeur Sanders, a high-profile quarterback with a built-in fan base, an NFL-ready resume, and a famous last name. Kevin Stefanski, another quiet figure with league clout, tied to rumors of behind-the-scenes negotiations during the draft cycle. Teams passing on Shedeur without clear justification. And all of it happening without any real explanation from the league or insiders. No leaks. No anonymous scouts tearing down his mechanics. No whispered concerns about character. Just vague comments and silence. That silence? That's the giveaway. Because in the NFL, when a player really drops, there's always a reason. And that reason always finds its way into the media. But Shedeur's drop was wrapped in nothing. Which made people start to think, what if the reason wasn't about Shedeur? What if it was about who wanted to control Shedeur? The theory goes like this. Brady sees something in Shedeur. Not just as a player, but as a long-term investment. A QB he can help mold. A future star he can bring into the Raiders' system under his watch. Not as a flashy first-round pick, but as a mid-round project with low expectations and high upside. It's a legacy move. Brady has nothing left to prove as a player. Now, his brand is about empire building. And what better way to begin your front office chapter than by hand-selecting the next great quarterback, developing him under your own system, and presenting it to the world as your first stroke of genius as an executive. But in order for that to work, Shedeur had to fall. You can't pull off that play if he goes top 20. You can't get him into your system quietly. You can't control the noise. So, according to the video's narrative, the league shifted. Brady planted seeds of doubt. Stefanski and others kept conversations quiet. Teams were nudged. And when draft night came, Shedeur slid. All the way to 144. That number, 144, isn't just a slide. It's a message. It told everyone watching, something isn't right here. Because the drop wasn't organic. It wasn't performance-based. It was deliberate. And it wasn't just about Shedeur. It was about protecting power. The NFL is, at its core, a hierarchy. It's built on an old guard mentality. Veterans, execs, and owners who've spent decades consolidating control. And a player like Shedeur? He threatens that. Not because he's reckless, but because he doesn't need the machine. He comes into the league already polished. Already with millions of followers. Already coached by Deion Sanders, one of the few figures who has always danced just outside the NFL's control. That makes Shedeur dangerous. Because he can build without their blueprint. So the system did what systems do when it's challenged. It closed ranks. Let him fall. Cool the hype. Cut him off from first-round money and attention. Redefine him as a developmental guy. And eventually, when he's not the headline anymore, bring him in quietly under new management. And then the rebuild. That's the long game. That's where Brady thrives. And the suggestion that this could have been his play? That's what makes this story stick. Because it's not unbelievable. It's believable enough. Brady didn't need to make calls or demand anything. All he had to do was raise a doubt in the right room, and the rest would handle itself. The NFL is built on deference. A guy like Brady doesn't need to push, he just needs to suggest. That's how power works when it's quiet. And then there's Shedeur's response. He didn't rage. He didn't complain. He didn't even really address it. And that calm? That silence? That composure in the face of an obvious setback? That's what shattered the league's script. Because it proved he was ready. And it exposed everything they were trying to prevent. The NFL wanted him to wait. They wanted him to simmer, to grow into the role they wrote for him. But now, he's writing his own. And every day that Shedeur Sanders plays with control, humility, and the kind of sharpness they said he lacked, the entire narrative they tried to construct unravels a little more. The more he wins, the worse they look. And Brady? The further Shedeur rises, the more that podcast interview ages like milk. Because people will keep replaying it, breaking it down. And every time they watch him stumble, hesitate, dodge, those same questions will come back. Did Brady do this? Was this all part of a larger plan? Was Shedeur suppressed for convenience? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, then we're not just talking about a draft day blunder, we're talking about deliberate manipulation of a player's career arc. Not for the player's sake. For someone else's legacy. And if that's what happened here, then Brady's not just part of NFL history. He's part of its darkest patterns. This isn't about throwing a football anymore. It's about throwing weight around behind the scenes. And if the NFL continues to allow its most powerful voices to rewrite player paths for strategic gain, then how many other Shedeurs are out there? How many careers have been quietly controlled like this? How many stories were never told because someone with more influence decided it wasn't time? This is the part of the league no one talks about. But now, they don't have a choice. The narrative's out. The questions are loud. And Shedeur Sanders? He's still standing. Still calm. Still ready. Every league has its secrets, but the NFL has built an entire empire on mastering the art of misdirection. What happened to Shedeur Sanders wasn't just a surprise. It was the kind of calculated move that makes you question how many strings are being pulled behind the scenes, and by who. When Shedeur slipped to the 144th pick, most people raised an eyebrow. Some shrugged. Others just assumed he'd prove them wrong. But the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to explain how a quarterback with his pedigree, his production, and his poise, who came from a program run by Deion Sanders, no less, fell that far without a single clear explanation. No scandal. No injury. No red flags. Just, and then Tom Brady opened his mouth. One interview. That's all it took. One interview with Logan Paul where the greatest quarterback of all time sat down, got asked a basic question about the draft, and folded. Stammered. Deflected. Danced around the topic like it was landmines and tripwires. For a guy who spent 2 decades in front of cameras, answering tougher questions with a perfectly curated tone, this moment was different. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't caught off guard. He was caught too close. That moment didn't just spark curiosity, it set the internet on fire. Because if Brady really had nothing to do with Shedeur's slide, why was he so tense? Why did he suddenly lose the media polish he's known for? Why couldn't he just say, I had no role, and I think Shedeur is going to be great? Because, maybe, that wouldn't have been true. The theory goes deeper than just one awkward interview. Brady is now part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's in the front office. He's involved in conversations, personnel planning, and the long-term direction of the franchise. He may not have a headset on anymore, but make no mistake, he's still calling plays. Just off the field. And here's where the timeline gets suspicious. Brady joins the Raiders ownership group. Shedeur Sanders enters the draft. Despite being one of the most talked-about quarterbacks of his class, he free-falls with no credible reason. And then there's Stefanski, allegedly in talks with other executives, contributing to behind-the-scenes conversations that may have shaped the outcome of the draft. None of it is on paper, but all of it is swirling in the background. It's not hard to connect the dots. Brady and Stefanski didn't need to openly collude. They didn't need to make threats or issue commands. All they needed to do was shape the narrative. Suggest he wasn't ready. say he needed to develop, frame him as a media distraction. Subtle, non-accusatory, and just vague enough to plant doubt in the right rooms. That's how reputations are built in the NFL. And it's also how they're torn down before players even get a chance to prove themselves. This wasn't about Shedeur's skill. It was about timing, ownership, leverage, legacy. If the whispers are true, Brady wanted Shedeur, but not at full price. Not with first-round expectations. Not with headlines calling him the next great QB under Deion's shadow. He wanted him as a fifth-round pick with no noise. No pressure. No control over his own. That's not team building. That's narrative hijacking. And the worst part? It almost worked. If Shedeur had reacted publicly, if he had taken to social media, ranted in interviews, or lashed out, it would have justified everything they were trying to push. He's immature. He's not ready. See? We told you. But he didn't. His head down. He stayed silent. He went to work. And in doing so, he flipped the script. Because now the silence isn't coming from him, it's coming from the league. No one can justify the slide. No one can explain why Brady, of all people, looked like a deer in headlights when asked about a player he supposedly had no involvement with. No one has addressed the growing suspicion that Shedeur's fall wasn't just an oversight, it was an inside job. And here's where it all unravels. If Shedeur rises anyway, if he plays, leads, wins, then the manipulation becomes undeniable. The people who tried to delay his moment won't be seen as strategic geniuses. They'll be seen as the ones who tried to bury a star because they couldn't own his rise. It won't just be a bad look. It'll be a blueprint of how influence poisons opportunity. This isn't about conspiracy. It's about patterns. The NFL has shown time and again that it will protect its image, consolidate its power, and manipulate perception when necessary. And what happened to Shedeur Sanders? That wasn't random. That was structure. Brady didn't need to pull strings. He was the string. And when he hesitated on that podcast, we saw the thread. Now it's being pulled. And everything around it? It's starting to come loose. Shedeur's story isn't just a story of being overlooked. It's a story of what happens when someone walks into a rigged game and refuses to play by the script. And if this is just the beginning, then the NFL's narrative machine is in for a serious reckoning. Because players aren't just athletes anymore. They're brands. They're media savvy. They're watching the watchers. And the next time someone like Brady thinks he can quietly shape a career for the sake of legacy, they better remember, the internet doesn't blink. Let us know what you think. Was Shedeur's slide just a coincidence, or did Brady and Stefanski stack the board behind the scenes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you saw this coming, share it with someone still calling it strategy, and subscribe for more breakdowns. The more they try to hide, the louder we get. And this is only the beginning.